Hi, Dave Smith with Police One. I'm here with Chief Neal Rossow from Flat Rock, Michigan. And, we talk a lot about professionalism. We talk about all the things. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times it's more lip service than it is understanding. Talk about your philosophy of law enforcement.
I think that we are fortunately members of what I think is a very noble profession, and we talk about the professionalism part and how we treat people and things like that. But sometimes what we forget is the nobility of it, because at least in Michigan, our budgets are getting beat up. Our community doesn't always like us. In fact, they attack us at times. As well as that, I've been in policing long enough now that I never thought I would be at a place where I was considered overpaid or over benefited, but that's happened. And because of that, I don't want to say it's a distraction, but because of that, we sometimes forget what brought us to this profession, what put that passion in our hearts to become warriors and protect people that can't protect themselves. And I think people need to be reminded of that periodically, because we're distracted by a lot of other things.
Well, what would you tell supervisors and leaders in law enforcement to do to help reinforce that in their people?
I think the making attempts to stay away from the negativity. There was a while in my briefings when I was a shift supervisor that we didn't deal with negative things, and that was hard at times because we would introduce new policies and things like that. They would of course want to talk about that, and simply tell them go on the road and talk to each other about it, but don't talk it in here. And I think it's easy as a supervisor sometimes to forget that you're part of the administration, and you have an obligation to pass on what they want, whether you like it or not, and that should be done as positively as you can, and remind them of what they actually do for a living, because they become more concerned about the miles in the car and the fact that they didn't get a raise this year or that year, and they need to be taken back, almost to the point where you sit down and think about writing yourself a letter about why you came to this profession and why you stayed.
What an important mission we serve. One of the things I've often felt is that we talk to officers, young officers especially, about selling the ticket. You how to avoid a complaint is convince them they deserve it. And yet, a lot of times, sergeants, I think, sometimes forget that it's their role to sell a policy or to sell an agency perspective on things.
And I agree. And there's a quote from Colin Powell that I, of course, don't remember exactly, but he basically says, when we're talking about an issue or debating it, then I want your feedback. And even if you disagree with me, but once we make a decision, then we're going to decide where this agency is going, then it becomes your decision. And that's tough sometimes in supervision. Especially the mid-level, although they're the ones that really control the house. It's really tough at that point because they're torn between the top and the bottom, and I think that's a struggle at times.
I think that's a big struggle sometimes. Now, one of the things, of course, you believe in this vision. I guess, how do you project that to people to think about how to get their agency to believe and really follow up on this?
I think it's hard. Partly because it's hard to build tradition into the officers, or a sense of tradition in the officers, because in most states you're kind of fractioned on where you attend the academy, and you might be sitting next to people from 20 or 30 other police departments, and you can introduce the idea of a tradition and a belief system from policing in general, but it's hard to do it for the agency, and I think that's important. I think sometimes I need to go back to that, as our friend Bill Westfall would say, that belief system and the power of that belief system, and you are what you appear to be, and it's important to remind them of the fact that words like honor, integrity, and courage are part of our heart, not just words that we spew out to other people.
Well, and when you use the word nobility, that bespeaks an image. I mean, people look at that or hear that and they think of an image, nobility. That's there's a dignity, there's an honor, like you're saying. And I think that's one of the things anybody who's ever heard Bill Westfall speak knows that's how he projects all of his ideas as well. And I guess that partly as a leader, as a chief, as a deputy chief, or wherever you are in a command structure, you got to be able to look in the mirror and believe that you carry that nobility too, because people are going to be modeling or looking to see, again, they're looking for the chink in your armor as well.
Right. I remember reading a book at one time that talked about you are what you appear to be. And you can talk certain things and think certain things, but people watch you. And I talk about that when you're dealing with the role of a field training officer. They're the ones that decide what my police department is going to look like for 10, 15, 20 years. And if I don't pick that person right, and that's where I deal with the trainer's role in this profession, if I don't pick that person right, then he or she doesn't pass on what I want. And And sometimes even when they're struggling, they forget the obligation that they have, because when I pick you as a training officer, especially a field training officer, I'll use that as an example, I've decided I want my department to look like you, and I want them to wear your uniform like you, behave like you, treat the public like you, and that's an honor almost in itself that we sometimes forget because of the other distractions in our profession right now.
Right, and that people are, especially your subordinates, are always watching, and that's something that you have to understand. Like you're saying, if you're an FTO that's always yelling at your rookie, don't put your hands in your pocket, and yet you're lounging around, standing around with both hands in your pocket, they're going to model your behavior once they get away from you then.
Without a doubt, and they watch what you do. And I talk about it when I deal with character is a good example. Character isn't perceived by other people by looking into my heart or my soul. It's perceived by my actions and what I do and how I treat other people, both the public and the people that work for me. I think that reflects on who you are, not what you say you do.
Right. People are watching us right now, regardless of rank. What would you have them do? I mean, thinking right now, if they have a few minutes to just reflect, what are the things you'd have them think about right now to reaffirm these ideas?
A couple of things. First, I think it's important to realize that we are a very select group. I think Grossman talks about the fact we are the local Delta Force, and when things happen, like in Boston so recently, there's not highly trained military units that come in to take that over. They do. And when I talk about in my classes a lot, I talk about the fact that everyone's willing to die for their family. I'm willing to die for my 3 boys when they're young, which is really, if they were to drown in fresh water, that would be tough for me because I'm a sinker. But I would jump in. I would jump in without thinking about it. And what's incredible about what the people that do what I do and our profession is they're willing to do the same thing they do for the family for people they've never met. I think that's noble, and they need to stop and think about that. And I was reading the Law Enforcement Officers Memorial book. There's a quote by a officer out of Chicago, a command officer, and he talks about the fact when you start to doubt the nobility of your profession and belief in your mission, that you should sometimes sit back and close your eyes and listen to voices. Or when I talk about it, picture yourself at the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial and you're touching the names and listen to their voices as they say, thank you. Thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for protecting my family when I can't.
That is, I think that is a pilgrimage every law enforcement officer should make, because that wall has just that effect. It sanctifies our mission, sanctifies our profession in so many ways. I often think back, I read a great little book by a guy named Stephen Pressfield, who's famous for his Gates of Fire and other books about Sparta and Greece. But his book, Warrior Ethos, is just a small tract that talks and explains his personal philosophy, having been a Marine and him researching all those things all those years. He has a very strong core belief system. And the one thing he said is that there's a lot of people that appear to be warriors, like gangbangers, but they're tribes. They're just tribe members. And the separate is that selfless service. He said selflessness is what separates the warrior from a tribe. And like you said so eloquently now, that wall represents the selflessness. And each of our officers, our deputies, our troopers, our agents everywhere should be proud of that and live that, as you said. You know, that should be sort of their special emotional armor to make them stronger. Oh,
very much so. I think that everyone should make the pilgrimage. I think it's very emotional for anyone that goes there, and to celebrate other people's lives, that we're willing to die for their community, and that's pretty noble.
It is incredibly noble. I know, Chief, that's one of your missions, to project this out and get people to believe in it. And I thank you for doing that, and keep up the good work, because I do believe that I think the irony of it is that people who have those belief systems, that sense of nobility, and all those warrior values, it simply makes them more resilient, stronger, more capable of winning confrontations, healing from trauma, healing from emotional stress. I think it's a powerful tool.
Yeah, it's a group of people who are willing to die for a belief, and there's not many people in this world that are like that.
No, we're proud of them, and we should be proud of them. Thank you, sir.